Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader here. Welcome back to East Studio. We share others' inspiring stories so you can overcome obstacles and move mountains in your own life. And today I am so excited and honored to be joined by Natasha Owens, Christian contemporary songwriter and singer, and just an amazing person. Natasha, welcome to East Studio.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, you know what? I read about your story and a mutual friend introduced us, which was such an exciting moment for me because we share some things in common and some things that we don't, like your extreme talent, we do not share in common, unfortunately for me. But your story is one truly of overcoming, and it's so inspiring. And I really believe today we can help some people. And I know that you tell it often to do just that. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about your life. Let's start with just painting a picture, Natasha, of your childhood. And so people can understand sort of how you grew up and what your family was like, what your hopes and dreams were when you were young.
You know, I grew up, my dad worked for a pharmaceutical company, and all throughout my childhood and high school years, I trained to be a doctor. I went to, early anatomy classes in high school, college anatomy classes, took 4 years of Latin. I was the only child for 8 years until my sister came along, was raised a tomboy. My dad always wanted a boy. So, just had a great upbringing and married young, married at 18.
Wow.
And kind of had to put my doctor dreams on the back burner because I had to work.
Yeah.
And I always thought I missed my calling until someone told me, you think you've missed it because you wanted to be a doctor. You're not helping people physically now, but you're helping them mentally and emotionally. And that's just as important.
Beautiful.
So always very close to my dad growing up. And 10 years ago, he was cleaning his guns and there was a bullet in the chamber and it went off and hit him in the heart. And life as I knew it was gone within 60 seconds. I had never breathed on this earth without my dad, and I didn't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so it was like I had punched a pause button in my life and couldn't quite get going again. I was in shock. And I was the strong one in the family. I planned everything, planned the funeral, helped keep everybody strong, tried not to break down in front of everybody. And I was too strong. I held those pieces from God is what I did.
Yeah.
And so on the year mark, when most people are finished, or at least finished with the first stages of recovery in grief, I had not dealt with my grief yet. And I downspiraled into a deep depression.
Wow. And that was that. So you basically set it aside to take care of everyone else. How old were you when your father died? How old was he?
I was 35, almost 35. And he was, he was 58.
He was only 58. And what did your father mean to you? How do you describe that relationship and what it did for you as a daughter?
My dad always wanted a boy, and I came along and was a frilly little girl that my mom wanted to make me frilly. And I was with him so much in my younger life, and I was inseparable from him.
Yeah.
One of the stories that I tell, I was 5 years old and my mom had my hair curled and a brand new fluffy, dressy outfit. And we were going to take our pictures. And my dad came home early from work and said, I want to go snake hunting. And I could not get those frills off fast enough.
Oh my God.
And here I came out and I said, I'm going with you. And so instead of getting my pictures made all fluffed up, I went snake hunting with my dad. And so wherever he went outside of work, I was with him. And it made it I was closer to my dad than my sister was growing up. And so it made an extra void when he left.
Right. You were especially close. As you think back on that relationship and where you are today, what do you think your dad taught you the most? Like when you think about the things he either showed you, because often we catch things, right? As children, we just watch them model things and often those things are stronger. But when you think back on him, what are the things that stand out to you about his life that really made you who you are?
He had such a life of honesty and integrity, and they just don't make people of quality like that anymore. Yeah. Society's not like that anymore. Yeah. And he was so strong, and he was, very high up in his business. He had thousands of people underneath him. Whenever he walked into the room, his presence almost demanded that people took notice that he had walked into the room, but he was such a gentle giant.
Yeah.
And so I got my strength and integrity from my dad, my work ethic from my dad. You know, he was almost too much of a perfectionist, which has negatives in it
Yes, it
as well.
does.
But he taught me to do the best I could do and give it 100% regardless. And that has carried on into my family.
And you were brought up in faith, is that right?
Yeah, I was grown. I am seventh generation United Pentecostal.
Wow.
So very strict religion growing up that we kind of got away from after my dad's death. He had gotten out of UPC before he died.
Okay. All right. So he, that year after he died, and that, I mean, that is a trauma. That is a moment in time that it's, I mean, it's hard to process. I can imagine you go from normal life to just everything falling apart in the blink of an eye. At this point, you're already married and you have your two boys already.
Yeah, I had they were still young. Let's see, how old were they? They were 8 and 10 at that point.
Okay.
And they were everything. My dad was everything to them.
Right.
And so my oldest one, there's not a week that doesn't go by that he still does not cry missing my dad.
Wow.
So I had to stay strong for them. I felt like if I fell apart, they surely fell apart, you know, so I had to try to hold it in and be the pillar for everyone. At least I felt like that was my part.
You know, you hear people say that, and I can relate to that I needed to step up, right? And you did that. You needed to step up and be the pillar of strength, but there's a price to pay for that. When you look back now, especially that first year, what would you have done differently, or could you have done anything differently at that point?
I would have mourned a little differently. I would have tried not to be so strong and gotten in, you know, even if I closed myself up in the closet just to get it out.
Yeah.
Instead, I just shoved it further and further and further down. And it kind of I stayed too busy. If I was busy, then my mind was not on it.
Right.
And I could get through that day of life. And I regret doing that because I never dealt with it. And I had been raised in a strict religion, but I did not have a relationship directly with God. It was really with works. And so this was the first time my faith had been shaken, and that anchor was not anchored to God.
Yeah.
And I started questioning God, and I started asking why. And why is such a dangerous question, because 9 times out of 10 you won't get an answer. And I got really bitter. And so the things that I spoke became the things that I thought, and that became my reality. And I put myself into depression because of my speech.
So your words, you followed your words, really. Your words were negative. Your words were not faith-filled. Your words were such that you started to now go into a deep depression a year later.
Yeah, you know, Proverbs states that we have the power of life and death in our tongue. That's how powerful our speech is, because the moment we speak negativity is the moment that seed takes root in our mind, and it just grows like weeds. And it became a reality that everything I saw was through bitterness. Everything I saw was through unhappiness and sorrow and sadness. And it wasn't long that the devil just got in my ear and started telling me that the world would be a better place without me, that I was just so miserable. I was making everybody else miserable. And he does that. He knows exactly where to hit. And I went into that depression so quickly. 6 months later, I can't even see the light of day.
What is that like? There are people listening who know what real depression is. And then those are listening who haven't experienced it on that level. We all have bad days. We all have dark days, but true depression is itself something really different. Can you try to describe that to someone who may not have gone through it?
It's suffocating and it's paralyzing. And when you think about wanting to get out of bed every day, the choice is easier to stay there and pull up the covers than actually put your feet on the ground and deal with the day. You feel like you're in quicksand. There's such a heaviness that's on your chest and your head all day long that you feel like you can't breathe. Yeah. It's more than just a gray cloud following you.
Yeah.
And it's almost too much for someone to bear. You need someone to be a cheerleader right there at your side to say, you can do it, get up, and surround yourself with positivity. And I couldn't do that. It was easier to stay in bed. And
when the people around you were seeing this, Natasha, were they seeing this slide into darkness? Were they recognizing it?
yeah, because I wasn't being a very good mom at the point. I wasn't being a very good wife. We owned our own business. I could barely keep my head above water.
Yeah.
My husband didn't know how to help me. I kept pushing him away, and he felt helpless because he didn't know what to do.
Right.
And he just thought it would work itself out in time, and that he would be there consistently for me. And it just wasn't enough. I had to do it for me. And so 6 months into my depression, my pastor calls and says, I need for you to be our music minister. We've lost ours, and I need somebody to step up. And I said, I can't be that person for you. I can't even get out of bed every day. And if I had something left over, I would give to my family.
Yeah.
And so I told him no. And he kept calling. And he called on a specific day that I would be alive today. I don't think if it wasn't for him. He called and he said, I don't want you to say one word. I just want you to listen. And that was hard for me to do. A Southern girl that has a lot to talk about. It was hard for me to just sit back and listen.
Yeah.
But God gave him the exact words to say in that moment. And he said, are you tired of feeling the way that you're feeling? And I said, tired is the word. I'm so tired. I'm mentally exhausted. And he said, I need for you to just get out of the boat like Peter did.
Yeah.
And God always calls us out when it doesn't rationally seem the right time.
Right.
Because true faith is getting out of that boat and knowing that he's either going to catch you or he's going to teach you how to swim. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you'll just walk towards him and do what he wants you to do, he said, I see you every single week on the platform, and you have nothing to give, but God gives you that unending flow. And in return, he's going to heal you. And I said, I want that. I wanted to live. Yeah. You know, I really did. And he said, this is your last lifeline. I feel like if you don't take it, you won't be here.
Wow.
And so I said, I can't even read my Bible or pray. I'm not to the point where don't feel close to God at all. Is that the type of music ministry you want? Mm. And he said, it's the type that God wants. It's a process and you'll get there. And so I said, yes, not, you know, I can hear things and pick out things by ear, but I really can't play an instrument.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I can hear a song and go right out the main chords.
Yeah.
But I was too tomboyish growing up to even think about playing. You know?
Yeah. So you have to, Natasha, clearly you had the voice and you had the ear, which is amazing right there.
Yeah, so it was a position that I was not qualified for. It was one that I didn't even really know what I was doing. But God never calls the equipped, but he will equip who he calls. And it's a process. And you know, he gets you qualified for every stage that you go to. So I would start listening to worship music, and 60 seconds, 2 minutes, I was out of bed and getting ready. Wow. And so I used that worship music until I could get to the point where I could pray and read my Bible. Wow. It was a tool that was given to me. And every song I think I picked was a restoration song about brokenness. And it may have not been for anybody else but me. Wow. But that was that was the beginning of what I'm doing now, the beginning walk, and had no idea. I also still do, but struggled big time with anxiety. Mm. All growing up. I didn't want to talk in front of people. I didn't want to be in front of people. Yeah. And it was paralyzing to me. Sure. My mouth would go dry. I would have all of these symptoms. Yeah. And so doing a position where I always pray, sang, and choir sang, but I was back behind.
Not the leader.
Stepping a few feet forward and being a minister and being a leader and talking was a hard thing for me too, to get over in the midst of this recovery. Wow. And so he taught me all of that and did not know that it was a training ground for what I'm doing now.
Which is amazing. And now you are a well-known, successful Christian contemporary singer and songwriter. And you basically, can we say you had stage fright? Is that a fair enough label? I mean, that anxiety was really stage fright, right?
Stage fright wasn't even the word for it. It was absolutely horrifying. and I've gotten so much better, but the 30 minutes before a show is the worst period of time for me because, I never feel like I'm prepared enough. I always feel like I'm going to freeze.
Yeah.
I do so much better than I used to, but just to tell you what stage fright, how bad it was, it's a whole story in itself, how I became in the professional world. I never really even wanted it or thought I would even have another change of career late in my life.
Right.
My music fell into the hands of this guy that knew somebody that worked for our company, and he called me and said, I'm a big manager in New York, have always been in the pop and rock world, but I've never helped a Christian artist, and I don't even know if I can help you. And I said, well, let's pray about it. Mm-hmm. Well, 6 weeks later, he calls and he is on the side of the road bawling. His dad was dying of cancer, and it was on Father's Day. And he said, I can't explain it. I haven't thought about you in 6 weeks, but your music started playing on my phone. Oh, and he said, I'm on the side of the road. And he said, I'm bawling and I feel like God wants me to help you. Oh my. And I said, well, that's our answer. So we made our agreement to really go into the professional Christian music world on Father's Day.
Wow. Then perfect. How perfect.
God is always in the details. So then he called me back 2 weeks later and he said, do you want to open for Michael W. Smith in New York?
My goodness. Oh.
And I said, no, absolutely not. And he said, why? Isn't this what we're working for? And I said, I don't have a band. I've never sang these songs live. I have stage fright. I have anxiety. I just don't, this is too big for me.
Yeah.
And I said, no. And he said, well, let's just pray about it. It's October 3rd. We have a little bit of time. And I just about fell out of my seat. And I said, did you say October 3rd? I will do it. And he said, well, don't you need to pray about it? And I said, October 3rd is my dad's birthday.
Oh my gosh.
And I felt like God knew that I had anxiety and that he knew that he needed to be so much in those details that if I could see that he was in it, that I would say yes and prepare and just walk towards that. And that's what we've done our entire career. We've seen these big answers that God has put right in front of us to know that that's the path we need to walk. And so I prepared, I got a band, I did everything that I physically as a human could do. And then God just did the rest. And it was the most incredible experience that I have ever had. And that was the beginning of this career.
You recognize how crazy that is, that your first, like, can we just camp on that for a minute? I mean, at this point, you haven't recorded a record, right? You've written.
So let's back up. I had recorded a record, a guy that we had brought in for praise and worship practice and teaching us new songs from Nashville. Okay. I had just resigned as music minister. That church had kind of fallen apart.
Right.
And he texted me one morning and said, have you ever thought about me being recording a CD?
Yeah.
And I said, how am I on your mind? I just resigned last night. Is that why you're reaching out? He said, God put me on your heart early this morning. And so I knew that that was my answer. I had prayed the night before, God, what do you want me to do? I just feel like you have bigger things for me.
Right.
And so I didn't know why we were doing a CD. I just knew that I felt like that was what God wanted me to do. And I said, we have to do a restoration CD that helps people make it through a trial from the beginning to the end. And so we pulled writers, and I didn't, the first album, I didn't write any songs. We just pulled the writers, and I found songs that I connected to. And so if you put them in a certain order, it's the beginning to the end of a trial. Wow. And so I had just put out that CD just really for family and friends. Yeah. And that's what this manager had grabbed a hold of.
But that's what's so fascinating. This wasn't a record deal that you signed. This wasn't you being really discovered in the traditional way that we think of, that you literally had made this from your heart, made this CD, and that's what this guy's listening to. And then all of a sudden you're opening for Michael W. Smith. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, you couldn't have planned that. You couldn't have made that happen if you tried. You talk about that absolutely being the hand of God. So you do this opening, and no matter the stage fright, the anxiety, it's a success. So now what are you thinking? Like, okay, is this the real deal? Am I doing this? I am now going to be a recording artist.
Yeah, and I still didn't know what he wanted me to do with it because we'd worked so hard and we just had that one concert. And
Yeah.
so I went back to the hotel that night and I kind of my spirits kind of sunk and I became a little not depressed but a little down and
Yeah.
I fell asleep crying that night and I said, "God, what do you want me to do from here? I don't even know where to go from here." And 3 days later, a woman that I used to go to church with sent me an email and she said, "I've been having the same dream for 3 or 4 nights, and I don't know what it means." But she said, "You walked into the church and you went up to the altar and these wings grew out of your back and you kind of flew off." And he said, "Throughout the entire thing, it just kept saying that I made it through is not the true message, that rising above is the true message, and I will take you there on wings." And I called her and I said, "Do you know that I did a CD called I Made It Through?" And
Wow.
she said, "I had no idea." So I knew that that was the answer to my prayer for the next chapter of my ministry. I thought I had learned everything that I need to learn to teach people to make it through a trial. But God began to deal with me that rising above is totally different because we can
Yeah.
make it through and then not turn around and do anything with it. That
That's right.
we have to turn back and show people we overcome by the word of our testimony
That's right.
and be a light to those people and actually show them where we've come from.
Yeah.
And that is truly rising above. And so when I went into the studio with a producer to start writing, I had an org chart because I'm a CEO of a company, right?
Yeah.
So I had rising above in the middle, and then all the other org charts around it every song had a different topic
Yeah.
that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And we had went in with only writing one song called No One But You. My husband, he has just crazy faith. And we had been on the road and we had been touring with different artists for about 6 months. And he just couldn't find his place. He's tone deaf. He can't sing. He can't
Mm.
play. But he wanted to be a part of the ministry.
Sure.
And so one night he said, "I'm going to pray that I wake up tomorrow and either play like Liberace or sing like Pavarotti." And I said, "Well, you pray that." Well, we got up the next morning and he couldn't sing or play, but he had crazy faith. And so about 3 days later, he said, "I've been having this dream every single night and it's playing out because I'm an 80s kid. It's playing out like a music video in my head." And he starts telling me about it. And I said, "Dave, that's a song. Write it down. That's exactly how I felt in the middle of my depression."
Wow.
And so he started writing down, and we got with the head of my band and we wrote a song. And that was the first song that we'd ever written.
Oh my
And
God.
so we went into the studio with Ed Cash, who has written How Great Is Our God and Whom
Yeah.
Shall We Fear and everything. He's been a part of everything.
Yeah.
And he, if they chose me to do my record, it would be a lower level intern. And I wanted to get to Ed and talk to him and tell him my story.
Sure.
And finally got to him. And about 10 minutes in, he jumps up and says, "I'll be right back." He comes back and he's just acting strange. I thought, well, my time is up. And he said, "I don't know you very well, but as you were talking, God started giving me this song, and I had to get it down on voice memo so that I wouldn't lose it." And he started playing We Will Rise,
Oh
which
my
is the title track to the second record. And I started crying and I said, "That is what I needed for my org chart. That's the center, the
Yeah.
song that I needed." And I said, "Ed, can I have that song?" And he said, "God gave me that song for you, and I want you to help me finish writing it. And I'm going to be the one that produces your record."
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so that was the second album called We Will Rise. Now we have a third album and almost a fourth one coming out.
And it's following what's fascinating. It's following really the stages that you went through in your healing, right? Which is so interesting because I think sometimes we look at, we feel pressured to get to point B, to get to point C. We want to get through things and have God just take us to the end, but it's a process and we can't always see that next step. When you were getting through, you couldn't see the rise above, and it had to unfold the way it unfolded. And so now you have 4 albums. You just made a Christmas one too, didn't you?
Yes, we sure did. We
Wow.
utilized our COVID time being down off the road.
Yeah.
But we went in to do a third CD, and I didn't have the inspiration. No one said that they had a dream, or I had all these things that God gives me throughout the day, and I type them out on my phone on the notes. But I didn't have vision, and so I went in with Ian Eskelin, and I said, maybe we do a worship album because that's on my bucket list. And so after the first day, we had written 5 songs. The second day, 4 more. We had an album written in
Gosh.
less than 36 hours.
Wow, that's incredible.
And after the first day, my husband told me, he said, you may have not thought you had direction, but God met us there. And every single song has the common theme of 2 things: strength and overcoming.
Wow.
And I said, Dave, I feel like that's the chapter that I'm in. This is my 3rd chapter of my recovery. The first one is making it through, then rising above. Now I actually feel like I'm a warrior, and that I am strong enough to help lead others. And God just keeps amazing. He just keeps blowing my mind every single time when I think I'm done and this is all I'm called to do. He brings on another chapter of healing to help others.
It's amazing. And an ending for you that was so tragic was a beginning for you for the rest of your life. And God wastes nothing. He wastes absolutely nothing. He's just waiting on us to step into it. I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've gotten from people. I can imagine that you have absolutely changed lives through this message in your music. Share some of that with us, what people have told you about what it's meant to them.
God has used us to do unbelievable things. I mean, it's hard being out on the road. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, being away from my family. We still run a business and I have a lot of responsibility. And sometimes depending on the tour, it just gets too much. And every time it gets too much, I mean, we're always hearing stories of, I have fans that follow me today that have followed my entire career that wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for hearing my story. We had one particular guy. I was out on the road with Jason Crabb, and this guy had lost his dad, and he was planning on committing suicide that night.
Wow.
And he had come up to me after the concert, and he broke line in the merch line, and he hugged me and about broke my back, like gave me a good chiropractic adjustment. And he walked off. He had tears in his eyes, but he didn't tell me his story, and he walked off. And at the end of the night, Jason came on my bus and he said, there was a guy that hugged me that about broke my back. And I said, I know the guy. Yeah. And he said, did he tell you what his story was? He was planning on committing suicide that night, and his family had bought tickets to the show. And they tried to get him to come, and he said no. Well, his family coming home from work had got stuck in traffic and had to go directly to the concert. Well, this made the guy mad because in his mind, he wanted to tell them goodbye. Right. Without telling him what he was going to do. Right. And so he shows up at the concert, and they said, it's about to start. Why don't you just stay for 5 minutes? He was in the midst of depression. I opened for Jason, so he heard my story, and all my songs go around my story. I tell a little bit of my story, and then I sing a song. Yeah. And he ended up staying, and he said, does God really believe in second chances? And Jason said, for you to ask me that, you already know the answer. And he said, I feel like I have a second chance at life. And he said, but I've denounced God, and I've got all these almost demonic tattoos. And Jason said, well, you can get those covered up or taken away. And he sat there for a second. He said, God gave me a second chance, and this is my testimony. I'm going to help others with this testimony. And so we've had, just when that day I had felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. I just wanted to go home. Yeah. And I was in just a pool of tears and didn't even want to go out there. Didn't even have enough strength to go out there. I was in my own mind. Sure. And when I'm at my weakest, God seems to be at his strongest. And he met me out there and saved a life that night. Wow. And he always puts somebody in my path to let me know that what I'm doing is worth it and just to keep going.
That is an amazing story. Well, to that end, I would like to, in closing, just have you speak to that person right now that's listening, who maybe trauma just occurred to them, or they found themselves in a dark hole for who knows how long, and they just can't seem to get out of it. They have no hope. They don't understand the path. They don't understand what's happened. The questions are swirling around. Maybe they don't have a relationship with God, or maybe they aren't able, like you said, to even pray. Can you just talk to them as we close to just give them some hope and some insight as to how they can move forward?
If you are hearing my voice and you are going through something that's just so faith shaking that you can't see the light of day, it's a moment by moment step process. And the one thing that got me out of it the most was knowing how much God loved me. I had been raised in church, and there is nothing you can do to cause God to love you any less or any more than he already does. You can't buy his love with works, nor can you disappoint him so much that he stops loving you. And it's such a simple concept, but it's for people who've been, especially in religion all their life, it's hard to understand how simple it really is. He loves you so much, and it doesn't matter how far you get. He's right there. All you have to do is turn and give it to him. The biggest problem that we have is between our two ears.
Yeah, no kidding.
If we can conquer the battlefield of the mind, we have won the war. And sometimes it's a minute by minute thing. And so I would Google emotions that I was dealing with that day, whether it was depression or sadness or anger. And I would write scriptures down either on my arm or on a piece of paper, somewhere where I could pull them out. The moment you have a negative feeling or emotion, you need to immediately pull it out and start reading it. Like, God has not given me the spirit of fear, but he's given me peace and a sound mind. Okay, peace comes over, you can breathe for another second.
Yeah.
It may be 5 seconds down the line that you're pulling out that scripture again and saying, God has not given me the spirit of fear, but he's given me peace and a sound mind. You train your mind with God's word, and it's a sword for battle because you're in the midst of battle. If you can immediately nip that negative thought or that negative word or emotion or whatever it is with positive, it will not take root in your mind.
Yeah.
And that right there, it sounds so simple and probably silly, but it's what saved my life and it's what got me out of it. You have to pour in positive to get out that negative. And there's nothing better than God's word or having a few worship songs on your phone, something that tools are at your fingertip that you can immediately grab for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the truth of that, right? The truth will set you free. Telling yourself the truth about yourself, right? Because it's the lies we believe that ultimately keep us bound.
That's right, because we're perfect in God's eyes. He loves us so much. And that thought right there nips down any negativity that you could think about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That is amazing advice. And you yourself said earlier, that year of deep depression, a lot of that was due to your words. And so we have to watch our words, which then, come from our thoughts. All of that is connected. Natasha, this is amazing. I want you to give people the information on how they can follow you either on social media, your website. Your albums are for sale. I'm imagining on iTunes and all of that. Just tell people all of those details.
Anywhere you usually listen to music, you can find my music on that platform. But the simplest way to really find everything that we do is just to go to natashaowensmusic.com. It's a platform that you can buy music. There's a shop there. You can also have links to my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, to be able to follow what we're doing and how we're doing it.
All right. That's awesome. Well, I have to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Bruce Balbeck, who is he's a committed fan, right?
Yes, he is. He's awesome.
He's one of the world's biggest fans. Definitely. He loves you. And he absolutely, I have to just thank him for this opportunity to meet with you, to talk to you. I know that we're going to change some lives by putting this out here. And that's really what it's all about. Whatever we all go through, we have to use it to help other people. That is the definition of purpose. And you're definitely walking in yours. And I'm honored to know you, Natasha. Thank you again for sharing that incredible story. God bless you and all the exciting things ahead of you. We'll watch, I'm sure, for more albums coming soon. Do you have any news in that arena, or are you just released from this year? You've been working hard. So
yeah, so we were off the road. We did a bucket list of doing a Christmas album, which came out this past November.
Yeah.
And we have another album that one song is left on it that we're about to record. And it's going to come out before summertime, probably we're shooting for May. And it's going to be called Stand. We have a song that we wrote that we released last year in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because as Christians, if we do not stand up on our foundation, we will not stand at all. Mm-hmm. And it just gives us, it's an anthem song that gives us encouragement to stand for what is right and be a light in the midst of the darkness.
Wow, that couldn't be more timely. So I can't wait to
Yes.
hear that. We all need that. We need to blast that song. Look for that, everybody. Follow Natasha online. Go to her website and get on her email list so you can know when that album comes out and we can all get it. Natasha, God bless. I'm going to
God
let you
bless
go.
you.
You've given me so much time. Thank you for blessing me and my audience, and we'll talk soon.